ask y'all to pray for us as we try to bring the message and need the Lord's help. Today is always have. We have a thought that has come to us, and we want to read, beginning here in the Old Testament in the book of Jeremiah, and read the message here that the Lord gave to the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 7. Chapter 7 of Jeremiah, we'll start the first verse. And we'll probably read most of the chapter eventually, probably not all at once. But read about the first half of it, or close to it, to start with. For reading lesson and to give us a thought this morning. I'll pray for us, that the Lord help us. The word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Stand in the gate of the Lord's house, and proclaim there this word, and say, Hear the word of the Lord, all ye of Judah, that enter in at these gates to worship the Lord. Now, it establishes here that there's a word to come to Jeremiah from the Lord. The Lord has given the prophet a message. And he's telling him, go to a certain place, go to the gate of the Lord's house, go there to the temple and proclaim this word. And hear ye all of Judah. So this was a message for the whole people here of Judah, the people here in Jerusalem that would have been at this temple. Verse 3. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Amend your ways and your doings, and I will cause you to dwell in this place. And that word amend means to change something. You hear about amendments to the Constitution, or amendments to motions that are made in church sometimes, and that's an addition or it's a change. So he's telling them basically, change your ways, and I'll cause you to dwell in this place. Verse 4. Trust ye not in lying words, saying, The temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, are these. For if ye thoroughly amend your ways and your doings, if ye thoroughly execute judgment between a man and his neighbor, if ye oppress not the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, and shed not innocent blood in this place, neither walk after other gods to your hurt, then will I cause you to dwell in this place, in the land that I gave to your fathers, forever and ever. Behold, ye trust in lying words that cannot profit. Will you steal, murder, and commit adultery, and swear falsely, and burn incense unto Baal, and walk after other gods whom ye know not, and come and stand before me in this house, which is called by my name, and say, We are delivered to do all these abominations? Is this house which is called by my name become a den of robbers in your eyes? Behold, even I have seen it, saith the Lord. But go ye now unto my place which was in Shiloh, where I set my name at the first, and see what I did to it for the wickedness of my people Israel. And now because ye have done all these works, saith the Lord, and I spake unto you, rising up early and speaking, but ye heard not, and I called you, but ye answered not. Therefore will I do unto this house, which is called by my name, wherein ye trust, and unto the place which I gave to you and your fathers, as I have done to Shiloh. And I will cast you out of my sight, as I have cast out all your brethren, even the whole seed of Ephraim. And we'll stop for a minute at 15th verse. Now the Lord has a message here for the people of Judah, what remains at this time of the people of Israel. And he puts out here very plainly many sins that they've committed, a lot of wickedness that they're guilty of. Verse 9, stealing, murder, and committing adultery, swearing falsely, burning incense to Baal. And he told them things that they ought to do and not do, back in earlier verses. And the Lord has pointed out to them that he is very displeased with their actions, with their life, and the way they're doing things. And he sets against even coming up to the house of the Lord, guilty of all these things. And they were singing in the end of this 10th verse, we are delivered to do all these abominations. In other words, this is our lot. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And he's pointing out a hypocrisy on their part. And what he's calling out to them is that they are still going through the motions of religion, are still going through the motions of worshiping the Lord to the extent that they were still going up to the temple. And there were some that were still offering up sacrifices. And they were going through the motions externally of fulfilling the law, or so they thought. But God was not pleased with that. That wasn't good enough to satisfy him, because he was more concerned about the way that they were acting and the way they were living. He told them in the first part of this message, if you amend your ways and your doings, if you execute judgment between a man and his neighbor, don't oppress the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, and so forth and so on. He wasn't concerned about their external show of religion. He wasn't impressed by them going up to the temple all the time. He was more concerned about the way they lived, their everyday life. And that is true of God in that day, in the days of Jeremiah. And our thought that's on our heart this morning, and the point we'd like to leave with you today, is God has not changed his mind about that matter. Right. We can go to church every Sunday, Sunday night, Wednesday night, every night of the week, and we can put forth a show to our friends and our neighbors and act like we're religious people. But if we are not acting and walking in the ways God has commanded us to, and if we're not living an honest and a moral and an upright life, our church attendance and our Bible reading and all the other things that we might do that we think earns us points and impresses people, it's not impressing God if we're not the way that we ought to be. Right. And that's the point he's making to his people here. You can come up to this temple, you can come up to this house of God that is called by my name, and you can make your appearance here every time you're supposed to, but if you're still stealing and murdering and adultering and worshiping other gods behind my back, so to speak, it doesn't matter how often you come to church, you're still not right in the sight of God, as far as the way that you're living. Now, he brings up a historical example. And the last few verses that we read here, in verse 12 and verse 14, he mentions a place called Shiloh. And he's calling that up to their remembrance. And he said in verse 12, go now to my place which is in Shiloh, where I set my name at first. See what I did to it for the wickedness of my people Israel. What was Shiloh? Let's go back in history here a little bit. And just to explain what this means by him saying Shiloh, I'll read one verse from Joshua, the 18th chapter and the first verse. Now this was several hundred years before the time of Jeremiah. And this was the days of Joshua. Joshua was the leader of Israel after Moses died. Of course, Moses was the deliverer, as he's well known. Of course, God did the delivering, but Moses was the man who was the leader of that. And God used him for that purpose. When Moses died, Joshua became the leader of the people of Israel. And in Joshua's day, Moses brought him right up to the edge of the promised land, and he died. And Joshua became the leader, called by God to lead that people. And you can read in this book of Joshua how they began to conquer the land, the battles that they fought, and how that they went in under the Canaanites and the heathens that was there, and fought battles and took the land that the Lord had promised Abraham so many, many years ago. When they got to the promised land, this temple of the house of the Lord that Jeremiah was referring to in the message the Lord gave him was the temple at Jerusalem built in the days of Solomon. That was the house of the Lord. What was Shiloh? Joshua 18:1. And the whole congregation of the children of Israel assembled together at Shiloh and set up the tabernacle of the congregation there. And the land was subdued before them. So Shiloh was the first place there in Canaan, where that the temple, or not the temple, but the tabernacle, which was the tent of the curtains, wherein was the Ark of the Covenant, and all the other things that pertain to that. All those things that eventually would be put in the temple, which was a solid building, built in the days of Solomon there in Jerusalem. The tabernacle held them things, and it was designed, as Moses was commanded to build it, to be portable. It moved from place to place. And as the children of Israel wandered in the wilderness, as the Lord moved them from place to place, they could pick up that tabernacle and move it, and they would wherever the Lord stopped them and made them stay for a while, they would set the tabernacle back up, and they could worship and do everything there like they were supposed to do. When they came here into Canaan, as they began to establish their existence there in Canaan and the Promised Land, Shiloh was the place they came to where the people came together, and that's where they erected the tabernacle at first. And it stayed there for several hundred years, through all the time of the judges even. It was there. So when the Lord refers in the book of Jeremiah to Shiloh, what he's talking about is, you go back in your history, and you consider how back in the day when the tabernacle was set up at Shiloh, long before that temple that he was talking about, long before that house of the Lord was built, when the tabernacle was set up in Shiloh, he said, you go back to that, and you look back in your history, and you think about what I did to them, and what I did to them when they disobeyed. Now, with that thought in mind, let's go up here 300 or 400 years later, past the time of the judges, to the time of Samuel. And I'll read in 1 Samuel in chapter 4. And it mentions Shiloh here in this chapter. And this was a time, as many times in the history of Israel, that the Philistines came up against them. They fought the Philistines many times over many years. In 1 Samuel chapter 4, the tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant that was in it was still in Shiloh, where it had been since the days of Joshua. 1 Samuel chapter 4, we'll start in the first verse. And the word of Samuel came to all Israel. Now Israel went out against the Philistines to battle, and pitched beside Ebenezer. And the Philistines pitched in Aphek. And the Philistines put themselves in array against Israel. And when they joined battle, Israel was smitten before the Philistines. And they slew of the army in the field about 4,000 men. So, we have here, just shortly after the prophet, the priest Samuel, came to power, so to speak, or began to be a leader or well thought of amongst the people of Israel. They had another battle with the Philistines, and it wasn't going good. There's 4,000 people that got killed. That started this battle. And as you might imagine, the people of Israel were scared. And they knew they were losing. They knew they needed an advantage. They knew they needed to get the upper hand some kind of way in order to conquer these Philistines. Verse 3. And when the people were come into the camp, the elders of Israel said, wherefore hath the Lord smitten us today before the Philistines? Let us fetch the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of Shiloh unto us, that when it cometh among us, it may save us out of the hand of our enemies. Now think about that for a minute. They were losing the Philistines. They done lost 4,000 people. So, what did they say? We need help. We need something. The first question they asked themselves was a good question. They said, wherefore, or why, if we said it, we just say why. Why hath the Lord smitten us today before the Philistines? So they knew. They knew. It was something that the Lord allowed. They recognized that. They knew because of their history that when we fought our enemies, when everything was right like it ought to be, we won our battles and that the Lord delivered them into our hands. But for some reason, the Philistines have won today. The Philistines have killed 4,000 of our people. And why has that happened? Why has the Lord allowed that to happen? That was a good question. They come up with the wrong solution. Instead of doing what they should have done, let's go over here and look. Just in the 7th chapter, I'll just read a verse here. Some many years after this happened, still in the lifetime of Samuel, Samuel told the people of Israel this in chapter 7, verse 3. Samuel spake unto all the house of Israel, saying, if you do return unto the Lord with all your hearts, then put away the strange gods and Ashtaroth from among you, and prepare your hearts unto the Lord, and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. Now that's skipping ahead several years. But Samuel right there told them many years later what they needed to do. And that's the same thing they should have done that day. And now to answer their question, even though it seems like they didn't come up with the answer to it, they asked a good question, but they didn't come up with the right answer. They come up with the idea that, well, the Lord has allowed us to lose today, we need a solution. And Samuel explained to them that later on the solution was to get away from the false gods. Quit worshiping these idols that you have set up before you, and go back to worshiping the true God, and abandon your sin and your wickedness and your iniquity, and God will deliver you out of the hand of the job they already had. They should have been smart enough to know that already. We have sinned before God. That's why He's delivered us into the hand of our enemies. But no, they had a different solution. Back here at 1 Samuel chapter 4, verse 3. Starting midway when they asked that question, wherefore hath the Lord smitten us today before the Philistines? Here's their solution. Let us fetch the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of Shiloh unto us, that when it cometh among us, it may save us out of the hand of our enemies. So the people sent to Shiloh, that they might bring from thence the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, which dwelt between the cherubims. And the two sons of Eli was the old priest, Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. And when the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel shouted with a great shout, so that the earth rang again. They put their hope, they put their trust, not in God. They thought their problem wasn't their sin, even though it was. They thought their problem wasn't their idolatry, even though it was. They thought they needed a prop. They needed an inanimate object to help them. And that the ark was the centermost part of the worship of the tabernacle and of the temple, as far as an article or something that was made by the hand of man. And it was absolutely right for them to make it. It was made out of wood. It was overlaid with gold. It was told unto Moses that it should be made in a certain way. And when it was set up like it was supposed to be, and when everything else was set up like it was supposed to be, and the sacrifices were offered as it was supposed to be, then God was pleased with that, and He came down and dwelt among the people, and He blessed the people. And all those ordinances were good for them to keep. It was part of them obeying and worshiping the Lord. But those external things that was done with the hands of men has never been the whole thing that man needed to do to have peace with God. And there's so many that has been confused in this world that if they have their religious trinkets, and if they have their artifacts, and if they have various things of religious nature, they think those objects will protect them and shield them, and they forget that it's the power of God alone that protects us and saves us.
Amen.
The people of Israel, instead of realizing what Samuel will tell them many years later, your sin and your idolatry is the reason God won't deliver you from the Philistines. They thought, we'll go get that ark, we'll go get that trunk that's overlaid with gold, we'll bring it into camp, and we'll win. And when that was brought into the camp, the Israelites got happy, and they shouted, oh, we got this now. We got the Ark of the Covenant here. The Ark of the Covenant wasn't supposed to be there. It was supposed to be left in the tabernacle. That's the place for it. Yeah. So they went out of order to even get it in the first place. But they put their trust in that ark, in that trunk, instead of putting their trust in God. Well, what happened? Well, they were a superstitious people, and they were happy, and they were encouraged to go out and fight. Verse 7. And the Philistines were afraid, for they said, God is come into the camp. And they said, woe unto us, for there hath not been such a thing before. Woe unto us, who shall deliver us out of the hand of these mighty gods? These are the gods that smote the Egyptians with all the plagues in the wilderness. So the Philistines were silly enough, and they were uneducated in the truth enough, that when they heard about the Ark of the Covenant coming into the camp, they also gave it more credit than they should have. And they were scared, and they thought, well, this Ark of the Covenant, we've heard about this thing, and we've heard about what happened when Israel had it, and when they went before other enemies they had, and it scared them to death. They had the same superstitious idea. That ark was going to save the people of Israel, and the Philistines, boy, we're in trouble now. But they didn't run. They tried to motivate themselves. We read a little bit of this speech in verse 9. A motivational speech that they give themselves. Be strong, and quit yourselves like men, O ye Philistines, that ye be not servants unto the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Quit yourselves like men, and fight. Now, that word quit there, you look at that and we think quit means to stop, to back away. That's not what they did. Really, that word quit, when you see it in the scriptures used in that context, it means the same thing as we would say acquit. And that just means to acquit yourselves, or to be like men, be brave and be strong. That's what they were saying. I didn't want you to be confused by the way that word was there. It didn't mean they were quitting, it meant just the opposite. They were emboldening themselves, they were encouraging themselves. They thought, we're in trouble now. The Israelites have brought that ark, and they didn't mention ark, they said that God is in their camp now. They looked at that ark. See, the Philistines were idol worshippers too. They had idols, and they had statues, and they had things, and mankind, the world is full of different religions that have their idols. They have, whether it's a statue of a representation of a person or an animal, whether it's prayer beads, whether it's a cross on a chain hung around the neck, whether it's water, holy water that they believe in. There's religions all around the world that they try to reduce the presence and the power of God to some physical, man-made object. And the Philistines, when they heard of the ark being carried by the Israelites, they scared them to death because they thought that was God. But they didn't run. They said, we're going to stand up. We're not going to be their prisoners. We're not going to be their servants. We're going to just do the best we can. And we're going to still fight against them. Verse 10, and the Philistines fought, and Israel was smitten. And they fled every man to his tent, and there was a very great slaughter. For there fell of Israel 30,000 footmen. And the ark of God was taken, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were slain. So after 4,000 was killed, the Israelites said, "Whoa, let's back up here. Let's go get the Ark of the Covenant. We'll be all right." They went into battle and put their trust in that ark. As important a piece of furniture as it was just a trunk made out of wood with gold put on it. When it wasn't used in the proper fashion, when it wasn't utilized in the way God said to use it, it was nothing unto them. It meant nothing. It had no help. It had no power in it. We have this old bench here in this church house, and all the old-time Baptist churches I know about have a bench like this that is turned different from the rest of them. And it's what we call the altar or the mourner's bench. And I have said and have heard many people say over the years, it is a wonderful place to go to seek the Lord. But there is no power or virtue in this bench. It's just wood.
Right.
It symbolizes something greater. Amen. And there's people, I think, who think if they come to the altar, if they come to this place, that there's some magic or power. There is no power in it at all. But it represents a place where we can humble ourselves before God. Because God is nigh to those of a humble heart and a contrite spirit. And you can come to this altar and you can humble yourself and seek the Lord and find Him precious to your soul. But this wood bench didn't have any power to do it. Right. The Israelites put their trust in that wooden ark, that wooden trunk, with gold all over it. And 30,000 more of them died that day because they put their trust in the wrong thing. And the ark of God was taken. You can read the next couple of chapters, and I don't have the liberty to take the time to do it. But if you read in the next couple of chapters, the Philistines captured that ark and thought, not only have we beaten Israel, we've captured their God. We have the God of Israel. We've got Him bound. And you read where they set that ark in their temple of their God Dagon, and how their big old idol just fell down before it and fractured into pieces in front of it. And they come to realize, we don't want no part of this, and they sent it back to Israel. And I've preached and read about that sometime over the years before, and it's a wonderful thing for you to study. And I'd encourage you to do so. That God was displeased at that ark, which was important to Him, and it was necessary. It was something He wanted the Israelites to handle in the proper fashion. So He was displeased when it was handled wrongly, whether by the Israelites or anybody else. So there was some miraculous things that happened for Him to make the point to the people. This ain't something to be carried off lightly. This ain't something to be made fun of or to be used in the wrong fashion. But the fact of the matter is that the people of Israel fell that day, 34,000 altogether, because they disobeyed God. It didn't matter that they had a trunk there, the ark in there in the midst. Right. What mattered was, as Samuel later pointed out to them, you are sinful and you're worshiping idols and living in sin and wickedness and filth, and that's why you fail. And He told them, if you'll shun them things and put away your idols and turn back to the living God, then He'll deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. Part of that process was restoring the ark to its rightful place. But that was only part of the process. The biggest part of it come in here, don't it? That's what it all comes down to. Mm-hmm. For lost mankind, the biggest part of it, it's wonderful to come to the church of the true and living God. It's wonderful to hear the message. It's good to bow at an old-fashioned altar or wherever it might be. But the external things that we see with our eyes is not where salvation will be found. It's found in the heart of mankind. And it ain't got to be in a church house. It ain't got to be on the mourner's bench. It's wonderful if it is. But the point of the matter is that it's not things, it's not objects that man makes and builds and puts together that has any power with God. It's the shape of a man or woman or boy or girl's heart, whether they find peace with God or not. So they were going through the motions. So back here to the days of Jeremiah, where we started reading, I remind you that he was pointing out to them from their history. Go back to Shiloh and think about what happened there, and that's what we just read to you. He told them in Jeremiah's day, you come to this house, you come to this temple, and you say, and this is almost in a mocking fashion, as I read this in verse 4 that we read already in Jeremiah 7, trust ye not in lying words, saying, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. Almost in a mocking fashion in one way, as the people are saying, oh, we're here at church, we're here at the temple. Today we call it church. Oh, I go to church all the time. Are you a religious person? Do you know the Lord? Oh, I go to church all the time, and I tithe, and I offer, and I do this, and I do that, and I've been baptized, and I've been confirmed, and I've been this, and I've been that. Don't none of that matter if you ain't been saved, if your heart has not been washed. It's white as snow in the blood of the Lamb. None of that external stuff matters in the house of God. Yes, He's pleased with those things are doing right and in order, and there's a place for them, but none of it matters if the heart is not right. That's what it comes down to. Right. And he told these in the days of Jeremiah, you come up here to my house, it's called by my name all you want to. But as long as you're still stealing and murdering and committing adultery and worshiping other gods, I'll drive you out of this place and I'll destroy this house. Mm-hmm. And not too long after this, that's exactly what happened, wasn't it? That house was destroyed. That temple was overrun. It was tore down. And he delivered the people into their hands. Just as it was when it was in Shiloh for a few hundred years, the tabernacle was there in Shiloh. And that was where the ark was most of the time. And that was where their people went up to worship when things were done the right way. Well, that tabernacle had already been moved all throughout the wilderness several times. And after Shiloh, there was a couple other places in the days of Saul, you find that it was moved a couple more times till the days of Solomon when it was finally supposed to be permanently in the temple. But the place didn't matter. When the Lord said put it somewhere, move it somewhere else, and He moved it, that's where the Lord met with him. Yep. The city of Shiloh didn't matter. The city of Jerusalem didn't matter. The big, beautiful temple, and I still think it was probably the most awesome and most fantastic structure ever made by human hands. I don't think anything in the years, the 1,000 years since that has been built, of all the technical marvels and the architectural giants that's been built and has been constructed with modern technology, I still doubt there's ever been anything that was like Solomon's temple.
Right.
Because the Lord had a hand in that. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to take the time to go into all that, how beautiful it was, how everything fit together. I will point out, it didn't even have the sound of a hammer in it, the scripture says. Everything just fit perfectly like it was supposed to. But as magnificent as it was, as long as the people were sinful and wicked and worshiping idols, that building didn't do them a bit of good. Didn't do them a bit of good. And we as God's people, we take it apart to us today. We can come to the church house every Sunday, and we can sing every song in the songbook, and we can dress up in the finest clothes, and we can put all our money in the collection plate. But if our heart is not right with God, ain't none of that other stuff going to matter.
Amen.
There's lost people the world over that believe just like these Philistines when they heard the Philistines. When the Philistines heard the Ark of the Covenant was in the camp of Israel, it scared them to death. They thought that's where the power was. And even they figured out pretty quick that ain't where the power was. Because they was able to overcome it. There's lost people the world over that puts their trust in water. Oh, if I get water baptism, I'll be all right. They put their trust in having their name on the church book. They put their trust in repeating the prayer. They put their trust in rosary beads and holy water and taking the Eucharist or the bread and various different things and names that it's called. They put their trust in rituals, in things that men make, and none of it is worth a dime.
Right.
If the heart is not right with God.
Amen.
Now that don't just apply to lost people. I love what Brother Isaiah said when he got up and sung that song about do not pass me by, pass me not, Lord. And yes, and the thought there we usually get is of a lost sinner seeking, Lord, while you're saving other people, while on others thou art calling, do not pass me by. We ought to have that same idea about our work in life and serving the Lord. Lord, you've passed by, you give a thought to this one to get up and testify and tell their testimony. You give a song to this one. You call this one to preach. Lord, don't pass me by. Give me something to do. Give me a gift. Give me a talent. Give me something to do. And that should be the desire that we all have in serving the Lord. But when we go trying to serve the Lord, let's not do it with eye service as men pleasers, as the Scripture said. Let's not just put on a good show. Let's not just try to make everybody else impressed with what we're doing. But let's make sure we're doing what the Lord wants us to do. That's the main thing. Amen. That's the important thing. Back to Jeremiah in chapter 7 here. We stopped about midway through when he was reminding them of Shiloh and what happened there. And the example, many years ago, they had the tabernacle and they thought they could bring out that ark and they could win the battle just because that ark was in amongst them. And they got killed, thousands of them. And the warning is going to them in Jeremiah's day. Oh, just don't come into this house and think because you're in this house that everything's going to be all right when you're still living wickedly. Let's pick back up in verse 16 in Jeremiah 7. Therefore pray not thou for this people, neither lift up cry, nor prayer for them, neither make intercession to me, for I will not hear thee. Seest thou not what they do in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? Now that 16th verse, that's pretty blunt, ain't it? He's telling Jeremiah here, don't even pray for this people. This people is so wicked, these Israelites that have gone so far, that are so drifted from the Lord. The Lord's telling Jeremiah here, don't even waste your time praying for them. That's pretty far gone, ain't it? When the Lord says there's no sense in praying for them because judgment is coming to them. And you know, have you ever heard people talk about people that have died, and there are some parts of denominations of so-called Christianity, they believe in praying for people's soul after they die. Well, the Lord will tell you the same thing, there's no sense in that.
No.
Too late. But there's people that believe if they pray for the souls of those that's done died, that if they're kind of in the middle, they might be in the purgatory. And if the people left behind pray hard enough for them and pay enough money to the so-called church that believes in that kind of stuff, we might be able to push them on through the rest of the way to heaven. That's foolish nonsense.
Amen.
And when people's done died and gone, it's too late to pray for them. Judgment is done past. You're wasting your time, and God don't believe in us wasting our time. He even told Jeremiah here, don't even pray for these people. Don't even lift up a cry for them, because God knew their heart, and He knew the vast majority of them was so far gone, they was not going to turn back to Him. That's what He's telling Jeremiah. In general, we are supposed to pray for the lost. We're supposed to pray for our nation. We're supposed to pray for those that are evil and wicked. But in this particular case, God even told Jeremiah, don't even waste your time, because they ain't coming back to me. Don't even waste your time, because they're too far gone. Judgment's coming upon them. And he went on and pointed that out this too. Verse 18, the children gather wood, and the fathers kindle the fire, and the women knead their dough to make cakes to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger. Do they provoke me to anger, saith the Lord? Do they not provoke themselves to the confusion of their own faces? He said here, the men are building the fire, the women are getting the dough prepared, even the children are gathering the wood. He's telling Jeremiah here that whole country, that whole people is involved in it. It ain't just the fathers, it ain't just the men, it ain't just the women, even the children is in on it. Everybody's in on it. They're all in on idolatry. They have all turned away from me to their own detriment, to their own confusion. Verse 20, therefore thus saith the Lord God, behold, mine anger and my fury shall be poured out upon this place, upon man, upon beast, and upon the trees of the field, and upon the fruit of the ground, and it shall burn, and shall not be quenched. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, put your burnt offerings unto your sacrifices, and eat flesh. For I spake not unto your fathers, nor commanded them in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. But this thing commanded I them, saying, Obey my voice, and I will be your God, and you shall be my people, and walk ye in all the ways I have commanded you, that it may be well unto you. Now let's not gloss over that statement. He said at the end of verse 22, when I brought them out of Egypt, I didn't say a thing to them about offering or sacrifices. Think about that. When he first delivered them, when they was in such a hurry that they was to eat the Passover, and the Passover was to be eaten with their shoes on their feet and their staff in their hand. They would eat that Passover like we could go just any minute, be ready to move. And in the beginning of that journey out of the deliverance out of Egypt, and in the beginning of that journey, when he brought them out of that, the Lord said to them, I didn't say nothing to them about sacrifices and offerings at first. That wasn't what was important to him. He said the important thing was this, what he said, obey my voice and I'll be your God and you shall be my people. That is the bottom line of every will and every desire that God has had for mankind. The bottom line of all of it is this, obey the voice of the Lord and walk in the way he'd have you walk. Whether it was the statutes and the sacrifices and the tabernacle and all the things in it, that was part of what the Israelites were supposed to do. Whether it is the church that we have now today, with baptism and the Lord's Supper and proper ways of organizing and ordaining brethren to the work of the ministry and to the deaconship, no matter what it is, the bottom line is obey the Lord first and foremost. And then other things are fine in their place and they have their use and their purpose. But don't use them as a crutch. Think about the church at Ephesus in the 2nd chapter of Revelation there. Think about how the Lord praised them for their works and how they stood up against false teachers and how they were strong in the doctrine. But he said, nevertheless, I have something against you because you left your first love. They were doing many things by the book. They were doing many things like they ought to, but they had drifted away from the Lord because that is our first love. Our first love is not lost people. Our first work is to preach the gospel to the lost, but our first love has always been, supposed to be, the Lord.
Amen.
And they drifted away from him. They were doing things technically by the black and white of the book, so to speak, but their heart had drifted away. Not only they hadn't lost their salvation, but they had drifted away from a closeness with God. I imagine they had gotten cold and they had gotten, drifted from the Lord in such a way that even though they were technically doing things right, it wasn't really accomplishing much.
Right.
It's good to come to the Lord's house. We're to assemble together. It's good for us to carry out our ordinances and things in the right fashion. But don't ever lose sight of the fact that the bottom line is obeying the Lord and having peace with the Lord and following him in here first and foremost.
Amen.
That's the bottom line. The rest of it don't matter if we're not where we're supposed to be in the sight of God. I'm afraid we lose sight of that too much of the time. The Lord reminded them back here in Jeremiah 7, we stopped in verse 23, where he was saying basically, when they first come out, I didn't give them ordinances and sacrifices to start with. All I told them to do was obey me. I'll just do what I tell you. Then he eventually give them more things to do. But he's pointing out this is the bottom line, obey the Lord. Verse 24, but they hearkened not, nor inclined their ear, but walked in the counsels and in the imagination of their evil heart, and went backward and not forward. Since the day that your fathers came forth out of the land of Egypt, unto this day, I have even sent unto you all my servants the prophets, daily rising up early and sending them, yet they hearken not unto me, nor incline their ear, but harden their neck. They did worse than their fathers. So the Lord is telling them, all these years, hundreds of years since I delivered you out of Egypt, I've sent my servants, I've sent my prophets, and they've preached to you. And your fathers didn't listen. In fact, you're doing worse than they did. Verse 27. This is a message to Jeremiah himself. Therefore thou shalt speak all these words unto them, but they will not hearken to thee. Thou shalt also call unto them, but they will not answer thee. That's a depressing thought when you get to think He told Jeremiah, I want you to tell him these things, I want you to preach this message. They ain't gonna listen to him. What's a depressing thought, you know? I have had times in my life, and any preacher that's ever pastored churches or done any preaching much has had this experience, I promise you. That you've preached, and you've preached your heart out, and you've had a great burden for something. And the people didn't hear it, or the people did the exact opposite. That's depressing. That really bothers you. I tell you, it does. I've experienced it myself. And as depressing as that is, the Lord still wants that word to go forth. Why? Because even though He knows how it's going to turn out, it stands as a witness against Him.
Yep.
And it's recorded in the Scriptures here for our benefit. You know, the Scriptures say that the word of the Lord, you know, when He sends it out, it won't return unto Him void.
Right.
How many times have we seen it going in revivals and preach and be lost people there and they don't make a move and they don't do anything? And how many times has the devil tempted us with the thought, y'all are going to church, y'all are preaching, y'all are working for the Lord, and what good is it doing? Well, I've had that thought a lot. And that's a discouraging thought. But we have to lean on the promise of the Lord that His word will not return void.
Amen.
Now, it will accomplish the purpose whereto He sent it. You know what? We think we know the Lord's purpose a lot of times. We don't know the Lord's purpose. You know, a message of warning might go forth to people, and we might think in our limited knowledge, and we don't know, we don't have any foreknowledge other than what the Lord has given us clues and instructions about in prophecy. And even then, we can't agree on that, and ain't 100% sure of it. But all we know is our limited knowledge. And we might think we get up and do something to serve God. We just know this is going to be the purpose. This is going to be the end result. And it don't happen. And that's happened to a lot of people that got discouraged. A lot of people have probably given up and quit over it. And it's discouraged me a lot of times when I thought things were going to turn out a certain way and it didn't turn out that way. Deborah's heard me complain, I don't know how much over the years, when I had a burden for a certain thing or an idea for a certain thing, and it didn't come to pass. And I'm like, well, what in the world? God had a different idea.
Mm-hmm.
There was a purpose. We might not ever know that purpose. We might not ever see it come to pass. But if God has a purpose for it, and He does, He doesn't waste time. He doesn't do things foolishly and frivolously and wastefully like we do. He is the most efficient of all. We talked about that kind of being funny this morning, that God is more efficient than everybody. He don't have wasted motion and wasted time. The things He does, it will accomplish a purpose. We may not know that purpose. We may not know the end result of it, but it will accomplish the purpose. These messages, so many of which was preached. Jeremiah, these words that he preached to the people, that God told him they ain't going to hear you. But how many, like me, have got up over the years and read this message and preached, and people haven't heard it and paid attention to it? So maybe it didn't accomplish the purpose that people thought it would in that day and that time. But years and years down the road, it absolutely accomplished the purpose, didn't it? It absolutely was the reason for it. It absolutely was the reason that it happened, and it was recorded for our benefit. Sometimes the people in that day that heard it directly, it didn't benefit them. I think about all the things that Jesus did in His day, all the great works He did, all the miracles that He did, all the good teaching that He had, and how the majority of the people rejected Him in their day. But how much good the recordings of what He did. How many people has it helped all down through the years as it's been preached, as it's been carried on. So there's no room for us to give up and quit and be discouraged. I know it's easy for us to, but the Lord's word will accomplish the purpose that He sent to it. Now He told him here in this, and we'll read one more, I guess, verse here. We'll probably close here shortly. I'll reread this, Jeremiah 7:27 again. Therefore thou shalt speak all these words unto them, but they will not hearken to thee. Thou shalt also call unto them, but they will not answer thee. But thou shalt say unto them, this is a nation that obeyeth not the voice of the Lord their God, nor receiveth correction. Truth is perished, and is cut off from their mouth. Now judgment was already passed upon them, and the Lord knew what He was going to do. That's why He told Jeremiah, don't even pray for them, don't even plead for them, don't waste your time. Their fate is unsealed, they pushed it far enough. They're not going to come to me. I believe as it was the days of Noah. Jesus said as it was the days of Noah, so shall come the Son of Man be. If the Lord may let this world stand, I believe He will, till everybody that can get saved, or that will get saved, everybody can if they would. I believe He'll give them chance and opportunity. Well, He looks down among men, and looks at the hearts of men, and sees that all have found Him is going to, He's gonna call in to it, it's gonna be it. It's gonna be the end of it. Will we live to see that day? I don't know. It could come today, it could come tomorrow, we don't know. But the point is, every individual person better be ready. Every individual person better make peace with God.
Amen.
Don't put your trust in things, don't put your trust in jewelry, don't put your trust in water baptism, don't put your trust in nothing. But the Lord dealing with your soul. Finding peace right in there. Those of us that's been saved, let's keep coming to church. Let's do our best to carry out the ordinances and carry out the things He commanded us to do. But don't ever think that because we're fulfilling the letter of the law, and because we're doing things by the book, don't ever think that's a substitute for having peace with God and following Him in our soul, because it's not.
Right.
It's part of it. The main thing is to serve the Lord God with all our heart, all our soul, with all our mind, with all our strength. If we're at peace with God and living as we should and worshiping Him like we should, the other things we're supposed to do will fall right into place. They'll fall right into place. So let's not get it out of order. That's our thought, that's our message. I appreciate your prayers, appreciate your attention this morning. Let's have us another song, and let's gather around here and shake hands. Everybody worship the Lord.